Welcome back to the second session of Week 5. In this session, let's take a look at 3 foreign visitors who played important roles to introducing Western art and visual culture to Korea at the end of the 19th century. Many Western visitors came into Korea after the opening of ports. Arnold Henry Savage Landor was a British artist, explorer, and writer known for his contributions to art and travel literature. He was born into a prominent family and became well regarded for his detailed and vivid depictions of his travels. Landor was also an accomplished artist whose work often depicted the diverse cultures and landscapes he encountered during his travels. His art is noted for its meticulous detail and vibrant portrayal of exotic locales. Landor traveled extensively across Asia, including regions such as China, Korea, and Tibet. During his travels in Korea, Landor produced artworks that documented the traditional life and landscapes of the country. Savage Landor visited Korea in 1891 and was granted an audience with the king. Interestingly, he wrote about the king's genuine fascination with oil painting. He had produced a painting of Min Sang-ho, prominent official and nephew of the queen, which had been passed on to Gojong upon his request. He was said to have admired the so-called European painting, surrounded by his family and the household. Savage Landor wrote that the painting was kept at the palace for 2 days, and when returned, the painting was covered with finger marks of the royal family and other members of the household, who, despite the artist's written note to refrain from touching the painting, could not help themselves from poking at the wet oil paint on the canvas. Gojong seemed to have been very impressed with the quality of the painting and requested that Savage Landor paint 2 other portraits of Min Young-hwan and Min Young-chun before he left Korea. Accounts from Savage Landor are important references to the early response to Western art in Korea. After envoys who traveled to China and Japan later on, the social elite and royal family were one of the earliest receptors of Western medium, such as photography and oil painting. From this account, it is evident that they were both amazed by the new medium and were very receptive of it from the late 19th century, contrary to the general reluctance to accept anything Western during this period. However, it seems that curiosity on European painting did not necessarily mean a proper understanding of Western painting, even at the end of the 19th century. After completing the portrait of Min Young-hwan, the Joseon official became distressed upon noticing that his jade decoration, traditionally worn behind the left ear, was not included in his portrait. Despite Savage Landor's explanation that European art does not typically depict both the front and back of a person simultaneously, Min Young-hwan's dissatisfaction led to the artist to create a side view sketch to include the decoration. Moreover, Min Young-chun, Min Young-hwan's brother, was also taken aback at the fact that the painting produced by Savage Landor was on a wooden panel and could not be rolled up like traditional Joseon paintings. The understanding of oil painting and Western visual culture gradually grew and spread throughout the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century, as accessibility to Western art and art education increased, especially during the colonial period. Horace Newton Allen was an American physician, missionary, and diplomat who played a significant role in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in Korea. Arriving in Korea in 1884 as a medical missionary, Allen was instrumental in establishing the first modern hospital in Korea, which laid the groundwork for the development of the country's medical infrastructure. His work extended beyond medicine. He also contributed to cultural and educational efforts, helping to promote Western knowledge and technology in Korea. Allen later served as the first American consul to Korea, a position that allowed him to participate in diplomatic activities during a pivotal time in Korea's history. Allen forged a trusting personal relationship with Gojong. His tending to the life-threatening injuries of Min Young-ik, cousin of Queen Min, during the Kapsin coup, was instrumental to the foundations of this relationship, after which he became an important advisory to the court. Allen also assisted in the 1887 Korean delegation to the United States. Ko Jong's reliance on Allen even led to the decision to participate in the 1897 Chicago World's Fair. Horace Allen played a pivotal role in organizing the Korean exhibition at the 1897 Chicago World Fair, officially known as the World's Columbian Exposition. When Allen notified Ko Jong of his leave of absence in 1882 to attend the Chicago World's Fair the following year, Ko Jong proposed that Korea should also participate. It seems likely that Korea might have initially expressed interest in the World's Fair around 1891, but then withdrew due to financial difficulties. It's possible that Korea's participation was revived when Ko Jong learned that Allen would be personally attending the exposition. As Korea had minimal international presence in 1892, it's reasonable to conclude that only the direct and personal efforts of someone like Horace Allen would have made Korea's participation in the World's Fair possible. Allen's involvement in presenting Korean culture to the international audience at the fair was instrumental to the introduction of Western exhibition culture to Korea. Since the mid-19th century, World's Fairs had evolved into global platforms for showcasing national achievements and also became opportunities for non-Western nations to present themselves to international audiences. Allen helped curate and arrange Korea's first exhibition at the Columbian Exposition, where art, artifacts, and objects of daily life were showcased to Western audiences. However, due to limited budgets and time, as well as a lack of experience in the curation of a national exhibition, the display was hastily prepared and was received as more of an exotic spectacle of a non-Western nation. Despite many difficulties, the exhibition marked Korea's first introduction to a larger and general Western audience, and members of the Korean delegation were able to witness and bring back information on exhibition practices that were seen from the Columbian Exposition. In addition, Commissioner Chung Kyung-won reported to Ko Jong of the preference in Korean objects by Westerners that they were particularly drawn to Korean textiles, folding screens, inlaid mother-of-pearl, and embroidered screens. We will talk more about the World Expositions in an upcoming lecture. Hubert Vos was a Dutch-American painter who worked in Paris and Brussels and was affiliated with the Royal Society of Portrait Painters in the UK. Due to his marriage to the last princess of Hawaii, Vos had the opportunity to travel around the world to create numerous portraits of individuals of diverse ethnicities. During his travels, he visited Korea in 1898, where he resided for approximately 2 years, during which time he painted Ko Jong's portrait in oil. Hubert Vos's oil painting of Emperor Ko Jong from 1898 stands out due to its departure from the traditional Odin or royal portrait styles, both in its artistic approach and presentation. This painting exemplifies the shift toward a more secular style of royal portraiture that became prominent at the end of the 19th century. Unlike traditional depictions of powerful and divine rulers, Vos's portrait depicts Ko Jong in a standing pose with an awkward tilt and hand gesture, set against a plain background, giving him a more gentle and timid appearance. Vos was well compensated by the Korean court and was allowed to take one of the 2 copies of Ko Jong's portrait to showcase it at the 1900 Paris Exposition, signaling a significant change in how royal portraits were treated. However, this can be seen as a diplomatic exception aimed at Ko Jong's representation abroad. The portrait was categorized among various ethnic specimens from non-Western nations at the Paris Exposition. At this time, there were numerous contemporary Korean newspaper articles about the exposition, which mentioned that the royal portraits were specifically created for this purpose. However, Ko Jong may not have realized exactly how it would be displayed and that it would be grouped with ethnographic images of non-Western races. Nonetheless, the focus seemed to be on representing Korea through the portrait, rather than emphasizing the monarch's authority. Several other artists painted Ko Jong's portrait in Western medium, including Antonio Zeno Schindler, an official painter at the Smithsonian Institution of the United States, who painted Ko Jong's portrait based on a photograph in 1892. Joseph de la Nézière also had an audience with Kojong and completed the official portrait of the Korean emperor in 1902. However, portraits of Kojong created by foreign artists and brought back to the West were often viewed as visual records of the race and ethnicity of an exotic land. They resembled items in a collector's cabinet of curiosities, reflecting Western perceptions of the Far East. Despite this, the early public display of Kojong's image was significant as it introduced Korea and its people to the Western world, which was just beginning to learn about the hermit country. Not only did Hubert Voss paint the emperor's first oil painting portrait, but he also went outside the palace grounds to create landscape paintings. Voss used plein air painting to truthfully depict the landscape of Seoul. Plein air is a French term that means open air, which refers to the practice of painting or drawing natural scenes outdoors rather than working in a studio. This approach allows artists to capture the fleeting natural light, colors, and atmosphere of a scene in a specific moment in time. The plein air technique was central to the Impressionist movement in the late 19th century, and artists like Claude Monet and Pierre-Auguste Renoir used this approach to depict the changing qualities of light and atmosphere in their works. Voss's painting Landscape of Seoul, created in 1899, captures the city from the vantage point of the US legation in Cheongdong, overlooking Gyeongbokgung Palace. The panoramic view in the artwork features notable landmarks such as Gwanghwamun Gate, Gyeonghaeru Pavilion, and Bukhansan Mountain. In the foreground, a house with a tiled roof is depicted alongside peach blossoms in full bloom. In a letter to a friend dated 1911, Voss described Korea as one of the most fascinating countries in the world, noting the incredible beauty of the flowers that bloom abundantly on hillsides, in tranquil river valleys, and around picturesque lakes. He also remarked on the Korean people, whom he observed as members of one of the world's oldest races, who were always dressed in white and moving quietly, giving the impression of a dreamlike vision. Painting landscapes outside had been practiced in Joseon, where literati scholars would travel to scenic spots, often accompanied by professional painters. In some cases, scholars would write poems and have painters create landscape paintings to supplement their writings on the sceneries. In other cases, they would write and paint themselves. However, a foreigner painting outside, using strange tools such as oil paint, an easel, and a canvas, would have been a peculiar sight for Koreans. In this session, we've looked at how some key foreign visitors to Korea contributed to the introduction of Western art and visual culture at the end of the 19th century. In the next session, we'll look at the dispatch of artists abroad at the turn of the 20th century.